Welcome back. Washington State today joined 36 other states that have begun lifting some restrictions to gradually reopen their economies. As governors weigh the economic costs against the public safety, there is concern that opening too fast could lead to the loss of more lives. Dr. Anthony Fauci gave this warning last night.
It's the balance of something that's a very difficult choice, like how many deaths and how much suffering are you willing to accept to get back to what you want to be some form of normality sooner rather than later.
In Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee is now allowing restaurants and retail businesses to reopen with a maximum 50% capacity. And joining me now from Tennessee is Trousdale County Mayor Stephen Chambers. Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to talk to you because I want to get a sense what this looks like on the ground. My sense is when we talk about reopening, say businesses are opening up, I think people instinctively get this image of the doors flinging open, customers flooding back into stores and restaurants, crowding together, and this just spreading so easily. In Tennessee, as we mentioned, though, the rules are restaurants and retail, 50% capacity. Looks like employees and waitstaff have to have gloves and masks. Bars are closed. What does that translate into on the ground? What does it look like in your community, this reopening?
Well, here in Trousdale County, a lot of the restaurants have decided to stay with what they were doing a couple of weeks ago, so they are not opening up their dining areas. They're doing takeout, curbside delivery, those kind of things. So instead of opening up, as you said, and doing 50% capacity, they've opted to just stick with what they were doing beforehand.
So how does, as an elected official, worried about the spread of this and trying to contain this, how do you feel about how again, we say reopening, you're describing not a ton of activity there. In terms of the safety of the public, how do you feel about how it's going so far?
I think a lot of our business people have been very proactive. They were actually closing down the dining areas and putting in place the CDC guidelines before the governor ever issued any directives. So they've been very proactive about it. I do know that if you look at our numbers, it looks like we're astronomical right now. However, that's due to testing out of prison. If you take those out, we only had 29 cases before then. I think a lot of people in our community have been very proactive, following the CDC guidelines. And I think, again, other than that spike at the prison, I think we're doing a very good job. And I'm very proud of my community and what they've done to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
What would you like to see now? If I understand this right, the restrictions, a few more restrictions are going to be lifted in Tennessee tomorrow, affecting barber shops, nail salons. How do you feel about that? Would you like to see other restrictions lifted?
The regulations put in place, or the guidelines issued for as you said, the close contact businesses, salons, they're actually following the guidelines and being, again, very proactive. The one I was looking at just a little bit earlier is not allowing anybody other than the customer who is being serviced with their hair at that time to come into the building. So I feel very good about the businesses following those guidelines. What I'd see like to open next, in Trousdale County, we're very small, so a lot of the businesses we have were already able to keep operating due to being essential services, grocery stores, gas stations, those kind of things. So I think just staying there as we are right now, or even just gradually opening up based on the data at the time, I think that's what we're going to see as we go forward. But as I said, a lot of our businesses have been very proactive in taking those steps to follow the CDC guidelines.
You mentioned this, too, as well, the numbers coming from a prison in your county. There have been more than 1,300 confirmed cases of the virus in your county. Almost all of those, as you mentioned, are from the Trousdale Turner Correctional Center, where about half of the prison population, that's a population of 2,500 inmates, about half of that population has tested positive. Those numbers, and I've seen numbers like this in prisons around the country, just this explosion of cases there. I'm curious, how did it get into the prison? What's your sense of that? And has that come with, has an infection rate like that in a prison, has it come with a high death rate? What does that look like?
Exactly how it got into the prison, that's being, the contact tracing and everything is done through the State Department of Health. So right now, I'm not sure exactly how it got into the prison. It was either an inmate that got medical care in another facility and then came back, or a staff member. But right now, I don't really know. As far as the death rates, there was one death of an inmate early Monday morning. The cause of death is still not determined, so I don't know that that was COVID related or not. He did have some other health issues. But aside from that, we've had one death in the community about a month ago. So our death rate, I mean, we've had 2 deaths. So far from what we've seen at the prison testing, just the one from the gentleman on Monday, the vast majority of those inmates right now are asymptomatic. So I'm hoping that stays that way. But if there are inmates that need to be transported, our emergency medical services are standing by and we're ready to transport those inmates or work with other surrounding counties in the state to get any large number that are required transported to a proper medical facility.
It's been one of the interesting things. The numbers from prisons have been so disturbing, and any of the deaths, obviously, are terrible. But seeing this mass testing in some of these prisons where there have been outbreaks, and as you mentioned there, the high number of asymptomatic in those prison populations, I think that's been an interesting data point as we process all this information. Mayor Stephen Chambers, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us.